I'm Evelyn Gray, and I was 68 years old when I learned that a single text message could change the way you look at your own family forever. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I was loading a small suitcase into the trunk of my car, getting ready to spend a few quiet days at the lake cabin my late husband had built with his own hands. The weather was perfect. The sky was clear, the air smelled like early autumn, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe. Then my phone buzzed. I smiled before I even looked at the screen. I assumed it was my son checking if I had left safely. Instead, I read 8 words that completely stopped me. Mom, you're hosting Thanksgiving, 30 guests, everyone knows. That was it. No, would you mind? No, is that okay with you? No conversation, just a decision that had already been made. I read the message again, then a third time. I stood there staring at my reflection in the kitchen window, trying to understand how someone could volunteer another person's time, home, and energy without asking a single question. I slowly typed my reply. Then you'll need to hire a catering company. I'll be at the cabin until Monday. I pressed send, locked my phone, finished loading the car, and drove away. I honestly believed that would be the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. The drive to the lake takes just over an hour. I've made that trip hundreds of times. Every curve in the road reminds me of Walter. My husband built that cabin himself after retiring. Every plank, every window, every cabinet. He used to joke that if he ever disappeared, part of him would still be waiting there every weekend. 4 years after losing him, he was right. The cabin still smelled like cedar wood, fresh coffee, and the lake breeze drifting through the old screen door. That's why I kept going back, not to escape my family, just to remember the life we had built together. The strange thing is, people often assume older women are lonely. Sometimes we aren't lonely at all. Sometimes we're simply enjoying the first silence we've had in 40 years. I unlocked the front door, carried my bags inside, and put water on for tea. The cabin was exactly as I'd left it, peaceful, simple, predictable, unlike everything waiting for me back in town. 6 years earlier, my son Daniel lost his job. His wife Emily was pregnant with their second child. Bills were piling up. Mortgage payments had become impossible. I never hesitated. The family house, the one Walter and I had spent nearly 4 decades paying off, was more space than I needed after he passed away. So I told them to move in. I packed a few boxes, brought my clothes to the cabin, and let them have the house. I didn't charge rent. I didn't ask them to split the property taxes. I didn't even ask them to pay for repairs. Every December, the tax bill still arrived in my mailbox. Every January, I quietly paid it. Insurance, maintenance, utilities that weren't covered. All of it. I never mentioned the money. Not once. Because I believed kindness wasn't supposed to come with invoices. Looking back now, I realize I confused generosity with invisibility. There's a dangerous line between helping someone and teaching them that your sacrifices no longer count. At first, Daniel thanked me constantly, then less often. Eventually, he stopped mentioning it altogether. The house slowly transformed. New furniture appeared, walls were repainted, the backyard was redesigned, rooms were renovated. One day I visited and realized every family photograph hanging on the walls belonged to them. None of Walter, none of me. It felt less like visiting my own home and more like being invited into someone else's. I noticed. I just never said anything because I remembered my own mother. She kept score. Every gift became leverage, every favor became debt. She reminded us constantly how much she had sacrificed. I promised myself I would never become that person, so I swung too far in the opposite direction. I never reminded anyone that the house still legally belonged to me. I thought silence was kindness. I didn't realize silence can also become permission. By the time I reached the cabin that Tuesday afternoon, my family had already stopped seeing my generosity as a gift. They had quietly begun treating it as ownership. And I had absolutely no idea that the Thanksgiving text message wasn't the real problem. It was only the first crack in something much bigger that had been happening behind my back for months. That evening, just as the sun disappeared behind the trees, my phone rang again. My younger sister, Linda. She had a voice that could sound warm enough to melt ice, yet somehow leave you feeling colder than before. "Hey, Ev," she said cheerfully. "Daniel told me about Thanksgiving." I figured he would. There was a short pause. "So, are you really going to make this difficult?" I looked out across the lake. The water was perfectly still. "I'm not making anything difficult." "Oh, come on," she laughed. "The kids are stressed enough. Emily's trying to organize everything. Daniel's overwhelmed at work. You know how much everyone appreciates what you do." I wasn't asked. Another silence. Then her tone changed. "People are starting to worry about you." That sentence caught my attention immediately. "Worry about me?" "Well," she hesitated, "you've been spending so much time alone in the cabin. I enjoy it here." "I know, but people are saying you've become forgetful." Forgetful. The word lingered in my mind. I wasn't aware people were discussing my memory. Linda sighed dramatically. "You know how families are." "No," I answered calmly. "I know exactly how mine is." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she continued. "The house is honestly too much responsibility for someone your age." There it was. Not concern, not love. A carefully chosen sentence. I walked slowly toward the fireplace. Walter always said that when people suddenly become interested in solving problems you never complained about, they're usually solving one of their own. "Interesting," I replied. "What?" "You knew about 30 guests before I answered Daniel." "What do you mean?" "I received his message less than 2 hours ago." Another pause. This one lasted longer, too long. Finally, she said, "He called me." "That quickly?" "He wanted advice." "I see." The conversation ended politely, but something about it refused to leave my mind. It wasn't what she said. It was how rehearsed it sounded. Almost as if everyone had already discussed me before anyone had actually spoken to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of wind moving through the pine trees. Around midnight, I walked into the small study Walter used as a workshop. Inside one of the old cedar cabinets sat a wooden box. I'd opened it dozens of times over the years. Wedding photographs, old fishing licenses, letters we'd exchanged while he traveled for work. Receipts from vacations neither of us could really afford. Near the bottom sat a blue folder. I opened it. Property documents, insurance papers, the original deed. My name. Only my name. Years earlier, our accountant had suggested transferring ownership solely to me for estate planning purposes. Walter signed everything without hesitation. "It'll save paperwork someday," he'd joked. Neither of us ever imagined that paperwork might save something much bigger. I wasn't looking at the deed because I expected a fight. I simply wanted reassurance. Sometimes seeing the truth on paper calms the imagination. I placed everything back inside the folder, locked the box, made another cup of tea, and finally managed to sleep. At exactly 6:07 the next morning, my phone exploded with another call. Daniel. I answered immediately. Good morning. His response came before I finished speaking. What did you tell them? His voice wasn't angry. It was panicked. I don't know who you're talking about. The catering company. Now I understood. They keep asking who owns the property. I see. They won't finalize the booking. They asked me for proof. They won't take my deposit. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and stepped onto the porch. Morning fog floated over the lake. I don't control their policies. They said they need the homeowner's authorization. That sounds reasonable. This is my house. The words came out so naturally, as if he'd believed them for years. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked a simple question. Is it? Silence, then frustration. You know what I mean. No, I don't. You've lived there for 6 years. Yes, you gave it to us. I gave you a place to stay. That's different. No, he snapped. It isn't. It actually is. He took a deep breath. Mom, just call them. Tell them everything is fine. I'll be back Monday. Mom, you'll need a catering company. I repeated the exact sentence I texted him the day before. Then I ended the call. For several minutes, I simply stood there listening to birds across the lake. The strange part wasn't that Daniel believed the house belonged to him. The strange part was how completely certain he sounded. People don't become that confident overnight. Someone had been reinforcing that belief for a very long time, and I was beginning to suspect I wasn't the only person who'd been left out of the conversation. By Thursday morning, I had almost convinced myself I was overthinking everything. Families misunderstand each other. People make assumptions. Maybe Daniel had simply gotten carried away. Maybe Linda had chosen her words poorly. Maybe I was connecting dots that didn't actually belong together. Then my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Emily. That alone surprised me. My daughter-in-law rarely texted me directly. Good morning. Hope you're enjoying the cabin. I smiled politely. Then another message appeared. When you get back, maybe we could talk about the future of the house? I frowned. The house, not Thanksgiving, not dinner, the house. Before I could respond, another notification appeared. A link, no explanation, just a website. I tapped it. The page opened immediately. Silver Oaks Senior Living. Large photographs filled the screen. Smiling seniors, beautiful gardens, luxury apartments, professional caregivers. A bold headline stretched across the top. Because your retirement should be effortless. I stared at the screen. A few seconds later, another text arrived. Sorry, wrong person, ignore that. Wrong person. Maybe, maybe not. I placed the phone face down on the kitchen table. Outside, the lake was perfectly calm. Inside, my thoughts weren't. At first Daniel, then Linda, now Emily, all of them talking about the house, all of them talking about my future, without ever asking what I wanted. That wasn't coincidence, that was coordination. For the first time all week, I felt something far stronger than disappointment, curiosity. What exactly were they planning? The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Coffee had barely finished brewing when my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't a private message. It was the family group chat, 42 people, cousins, uncles, neighbors, friends who had somehow become family. The notification showed Emily's name. I opened it. The message was long, much longer than anything normally posted there. At first, I assumed it was Thanksgiving plans. Then I started reading, "After everyone finishes eating." Linda starts the conversation. I'll bring out the Silver Oaks brochure. Daniel will explain why transferring the house now protects the kids. Don't let Evelyn say no in front of everyone. She hates making scenes. If everyone stays calm, she'll sign. My heart stopped. I kept reading. One sentence, then another, then another. Every line felt colder than the one before. Near the bottom was the sentence I still remember word for word. She's already confused most of the time, so convincing her shouldn't be difficult. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I simply stared. 90 seconds later, Emily posted another message. "Wrong chat!" The message disappeared almost immediately, but not before I had already taken screenshots. 1, 2, 3. I checked my gallery. They were there. Every word. Permanent. I set my phone down very carefully, not because my hands were shaking. Oddly enough, they weren't. I had imagined betrayal would feel explosive. Instead, it felt unbelievably quiet, like standing in fresh snow after a storm. Everything suddenly made sense. The concern, the phone calls, the retirement community, the urgency. Thanksgiving had never been about family. It was a stage, 30 witnesses, one carefully planned conversation, one elderly woman, one stack of legal papers. They weren't hoping I would agree. They were counting on the fact that I hated embarrassing people. They believed I would sign almost anything rather than create a scene, what they never considered. Was that staying silent and staying weak are not the same thing? I made another cup of coffee, sat beside the window, opened the screenshots again. Then I opened the blue folder with the property deed. One document, one legal owner, one name, mine. For 6 years, I had avoided mentioning it because I believed reminding people of your generosity somehow made it less generous. Now I understood the difference. There is a world of difference between controlling people and refusing to let them steal from you. Walter used to say something whenever we signed important contracts. Facts don't get emotional. Looking at the deed, I finally understood exactly what he meant. Facts don't argue. They don't panic. They simply exist, and I suddenly realized facts were about to become my greatest advantage. I reached for my phone. There was one person I trusted more than anyone else to help me make sure every single fact was on my side. I scrolled through my contacts, found her name, and pressed call. The phone rang before the first ring had finished. Esther Collins. She had been my attorney for nearly 30 years. I told her everything. Daniel's message, Linda's phone call, the retirement community brochure, the screenshots. When I finished, she asked only one question. "Who owns the house?" "I do." "Then you have nothing to fear." On Monday, we met in her office. She reviewed every document, the deed, the tax records, the insurance papers. Everything confirmed the same fact. The house legally belonged to me. Only me. She prepared 2 documents. The first was a 30-day notice for Daniel and Emily to move out. The second transferred the house into a trust for my grandchildren. I signed both. Then I waited. Thanksgiving arrived. 30 people filled the house. Everyone smiled as if nothing had happened. Dinner was perfect. Right before dessert, Daniel stood up. "I'd like to say a few words." The room became silent. He thanked me for everything I'd done for the family. Then Linda quietly mentioned she was worried about my memory. Emily placed a retirement community brochure on the table, exactly as planned. Daniel slid a document toward me. "Mom, if you sign this, we'll take care of the house from now on." I looked at the papers, then I closed them. "I have something to show everyone first." I removed 3 things from my handbag: the property deed, a certified legal copy, the screenshots from the family chat. No one spoke. "The house has always belonged to me," I said calmly, "and these messages explain exactly how you plan to convince me to sign it away." Emily froze. Daniel stared at the table. Linda couldn't say a word. I let everyone read the screenshots themselves. The room became completely silent. "I let you live here for 6 years," I continued. "I paid every tax bill, every insurance payment, every repair. I never asked for anything. But generosity is not ownership." I handed Daniel one final envelope. He opened it, a 30-day notice. "You want us to leave? I want you to respect the boundaries you ignored." No one defended them. I stood, picked up my coat, and looked at my grandchildren. "This isn't your fault. I love both of you." Then I smiled at the guests. "Dinner is already paid for. Please enjoy it." And I walked out. Daniel and Emily moved out before the notice expired. The trust was finalized weeks later. One day, the house will belong to my grandchildren, because I chose that future, not because someone pressured me. Daniel and I still speak carefully, respectfully. Some relationships survive only after boundaries are finally respected. Looking back, I no longer think about that text message with anger. I think of it as the moment I stopped confusing kindness with obligation. The people who truly love you will never assume they're entitled to your generosity. They'll ask, and they'll respect your answer, even if that answer is no.